So again, thank you to the European Movement for welcoming me this evening. Pleasure to be here. Tonight's event comes 1 week after marking the third anniversary of the United Kingdom leaving the EU. Last week's anniversary also coincided with the IMF's latest projections that the UK economy will shrink and perform worse than other advanced economies, including sanctions hit Russia. And in fact, since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, the UK's economy has underperformed compared with every other G7 counterpart, being the only one not to have recovered to its pre-pandemic size. The Office for Budget Responsibility expects the UK economy to end up 4% smaller than it would have otherwise have been, which is £100 billion a year hit to prosperity. Now, whilst the Prime Minister waxes lyrical on the huge strides and freedoms unlocked, as he would put it, by Brexit, the reality is that we are lagging behind our European and international counterparts. Our economy has been uniquely exposed, and there is considerable evidence that Brexit and the government's bad deal is the root of the damage. Many of the public know that they've been sold a lie. The most recent post-Brexit poll of polls show that 58% of voters in the UK are now in favour of rejoining the EU, which is the highest level since the 2016 referendum. Just 42% want to remain outside the bloc. Another poll published by Ipsos last Monday found that 45% thought Brexit was going worse than they expected, which is up sharply from 28% in June of 2021. Now, I'll touch on the retained EU law bill, which is the bill, as the government would have it, that would scrap EU laws, and I see as a sort of scorched earth policy on leaving the EU because they think they might not be around at the next election, such that they would wreck the EU laws that are still obviously in place and in force in this country. Now, to prove he is getting, as he would put it, Brexit done, and to distract from the dismal economic state of this country at the moment, the Prime Minister is in favour of a bonfire of EU regulations. The scrapping of EU laws would be in direct violation of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which the UK and the EU agreed to on the 24th of December 2020 to govern the future trading and security relationship following the UK's departure from the EU. And through the TCA, the UK agreed to a level playing field by maintaining high standards on labour and social protection, the environment, climate and other areas in order to ensure that conditions for UK-EU trade would be fair. And this was in return for the EU agreeing to tariff-free access to the single market for British manufactured goods. Now, the retained EU law bill, which passed through the House of Commons and is currently before the House of Lords, could potentially remove or weaken those fundamental laws concerning and covering consumer rights, food, travel and product safety laws, potentially affecting up to 44,000 individual pieces of EU legislation. And the repeal of such laws without proper consideration will cause significant confusion and disruption for businesses and workers, threaten the rights and protections of working people, consumers and the environment. And even more, the EU has warned of retaliatory moves if this bill is passed, which could trigger a trade war and jeopardise recent progress that has been made in other areas of the relationship. Now, one area of that relationship is regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol talks, which has been another ongoing challenge following Brexit. Even though the Northern Ireland Protocol was an integral part of the 2019 Brexit agreement signed between Boris Johnson and the EU in order to get him through the 2019 general election on the messages of getting Brexit done and taking back control. And of course, since then, we've seen anything but. And at the time, the former Prime Minister stated, "Over my dead body," and insisted that there would be no border between Britain and Northern Ireland down the Irish Sea. Yet this has proved to be another one of those lies, purposely misleading people about what had been agreed, as the protocol did indeed create a border in the Irish Sea to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. Now, shortly after the Brexit transition in 2021, Johnson demanded a full-scale renegotiation of the deal that he'd agreed to, which took EU-UK relations to an all-time low and further betrayed the UK's credibility and international standing as trusted partners. Northern Ireland has also been a sticking point with the United States. Before meeting with the then Prime Minister Liz Truss in September of last year, the White House warned that efforts to undo the Northern Ireland Protocol by the British government could impact the chances of a new US-UK trade deal being agreed. President Biden is committed to upholding the Good Friday Agreement, and it's clear that his administration is not prioritising the UK-US trade deal under this term of his presidency. Now, while difficulties remain concerning the Northern Ireland Protocol, recent talks have been progressing in relation to sanitary and phytosanitary issues at Northern Ireland ports, which will govern both food safety and animal health issues, as well as customs formalities. European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic wants to re-establish trust and believes the greater the safeguards the UK presents, the more flexibility the EU can offer. Now, moving on to education, with regards to the other challenges posed by Brexit, it would be remiss not to address how education has suffered. To the dismay of many, the UK is no longer a participant of the EU programme Erasmus, which supported education, training, youth and sport across Europe for young people. And while the Turing scheme has been introduced as a new British exchange programme, allowing British students to go to countries beyond Europe, it isn't reciprocal, meaning that European students aren't able to come to the UK as before. And as a result, the number of EU students choosing to study in the UK has dropped by 53% after Brexit. Now, a prominent cause of this is the change in the student policy fee. Before Brexit, students paid home fees of just over £9,000 and were eligible for student finance. After Brexit, fees for EU students have risen as high as £38,000. Incoming EU students also need to obtain visas and provide proof that they can support themselves. And whilst there has been an increase in non-EU international students in the UK, Universities UK has said that this increase doesn't offset the exodus of EU students at undergraduate level. This has resulted in weaker financial stability in some third-level education and reduced diversity across some subject areas, relegating our world-class universities to the side. Now, all of this leads me to my party's plans, the Labour Party's plans, for strengthening cooperation between the United Kingdom and the European Union. As our Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said in his speech to Chatham House on January the 24th, Labour's new vision is of Britain reconnected. While the UK has left the EU, the UK has not yet found a new, settled and confident place in Europe, and Labour hopes to change this. We understand that Europeans are more than just trading partners. We share security and faith in this changing world, and it's undeniable that foreign policy is shaping the lives of people in this country. Under a Labour government, there will be a UK-EU security pact to complement Labour's unshakable commitment to NATO and seek new cooperation across foreign policy through regular EU-UK summits and a structured dialogue to tackle Europe's shared threats in areas like cyber, energy security and organised crime. There would also be a commitment to champion UK's prosperity by boosting trade, restoring cooperation on science and research in the UK, and repairing relations with the EU while remaining outside of the single market and the customs union. Now, for many of us here, particularly myself as a former MEP and somebody who trained as an engineer in Germany and learnt the language and have many links still in Germany, to me this is very difficult to swallow. But it is, I think, the best way forward, certainly if the country decides it wants a Labour government. And it will fall far short of what many of us here tonight would want. But it's where I believe the Labour Party needs to be at the moment, so as not to totally open up and return to all the Brexit arguments which have permeated UK politics for the last 7 or 8 years. The party believes this can be achieved by, obviously, first of all, fixing the Northern Ireland Protocol, reducing friction on food, agricultural, medical and veterinary goods, strengthening recognition of professional standards and qualifications, unblocking participation in the Horizon scheme and improving links between our students and universities, and to that view, I would say a return to Erasmus too. We can go through research and development in science and technology, industrial development and innovation, the UK-EU and UK-EU strategic priorities like the Paris Climate Change Agreement and moving towards net zero. And I believe this can build a new focus on EU-UK cooperation. And with regards to defence, Labour would negotiate new mechanisms for cooperation on hybrid threats between the EU and UK defence industries. As John Healy, our shadow defence spokesperson, outlined at an event at RUSI earlier this week, it's crucial that the UK rebuilds relationships with our European allies to make Brexit work far better for the UK in future than it has done to date. Now, I think we all believe that Brexit is fundamentally flawed, but the positions we are taking as a party are where we are, and I believe where we need to be if we wish, and seriously wish, to win the next election. Now, the approaches I have outlined as part of the agenda for the first term of the next Labour government would, I believe, stand us in good stead for a general election afterwards. And if we sensed, and this is a personal view, and if we sensed an overwhelming wish by the electorate to want the UK to open talks, to consider joining the EU again in the future, then we could look at that as a consideration of where to position ourselves at any subsequent general election. I must stress, though, that this is a personal view. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it.